Hello, I'm Liza. Today news. High pollution warning issued for London. A high air pollution alert has been issued for London on Tuesday as temperatures are forecast to rise above 30 C. City Hall said strong sunshine and hot weather are expected to trigger high ozone levels, with airflow from mainland Europe likely to worsen the situation. The forecast, produced by Imperial College London, prompted the Mayor's office to trigger the alert, which will be displayed on bus stop countdown boards, London Underground signs, and sent to schools and borough councils. Mayte Colburn, the Deputy Mayor for Environment and Energy, said London's toxic air is linked to around 4,000 premature deaths in the capital each year. We are urging Londoners to look after themselves in this pollution alert during the hot weather, stop their engines idling, and refrain from burning wood or garden waste, all of which contribute to high levels of pollution, he said. High air pollution can particularly affect older people, young children, and those with existing heart and lung conditions. The warning system was introduced by the Mayor in 2016. It uses the government's Daily Air Quality Index to determine when alerts are triggered. The UK Health Security Agency has issued heat health alerts for all of England, beginning on Tuesday morning and lasting until Wednesday. London is among the regions facing the hottest conditions, with temperatures of up to 34 C, 93 F forecast, triggering an amber alert. An air quality report, external published last year, said high pollution episodes were now a rare occurrence in London. It said between 2018 and 2023, 19 high pollution alerts were issued, and 217 moderate pollution alerts, enabling Londoners to increase their awareness of high pollution episodes and take precautionary action on these days. Lee, Trump to hold first summit in Washington on August 25. President Lee Jae-myung will hold his first summit with U.S. President Donald Trump in Washington on August 25, the presidential office said on August 12. Lee will visit the United States from August 24 to 26 at Trump's invitation. The meeting will take place 82 days after Lee took office in June. The two leaders will discuss ways to develop the alliance into a future-oriented, comprehensive strategic partnership in response to changing international security and economic conditions. Presidential spokesperson Kang Yoo-jong told a briefing. Kang said the talks would also address strengthening the joint defense posture, peace on the Korean Peninsula, and denuclearization. Based on a recently concluded tariff agreement, the leaders are also expected to discuss expanding cooperation in semiconductors, batteries and shipbuilding, as well as partnerships in advanced technology and critical minerals, Kang added. Israel plans to expand the war in Gaza. Here's what we know. Jerusalem. Israel's Security Cabinet has voted to expand the war in Gaza, marking a major escalation at a time when it is under intense domestic and international pressure to end the conflict. The cabinet approved plans to capture Gaza City, in the north of the territory, as part of Israel's goals to destroy Hamas and rescue hostages the militants are holding. But the move raised fears further fighting will only endanger captives and worsen an already dire humanitarian crisis. The plan also brings Israel closer to fully occupying Gaza, something it has not done for nearly 20 years. Here's what we know about the decision that may reshape the war in Gaza. What do we know about the plan? After a marathon session, Israel's Security Cabinet voted to adopt what it called the 5 principles for ending the war. These include disarming Hamas, returning the hostages held there, the demilitarization of the enclave, Israeli security control of Gaza, and the eventual establishment of a civilian administration that is neither Hamas nor the internationally recognized Palestinian Authority. The 5-month plan would take place in several phases, beginning with a takeover of Gaza City, while distributing humanitarian assistance, according to the Prime Minister's Office, PMO. The deadline for the first phase, which includes the evacuation of Gaza City and an expansion of the aid distribution, is October 7, according to an Israeli source, intentionally picked to mark the 2-year anniversary of the Hamas-led attack on Israel. The plan would mean mobilizing thousands of soldiers already fatigued by months of fighting in the territory. A satellite image captured on Friday morning by Planet Labs showed more than 100 military vehicles parked at a depot near Israel's Nahal Oz, crossing into Gaza, just 2 miles from Gaza City. The depot, located along the 1949 Armistice Line, is surrounded by several defensive berms, but the PMO said the vast majority of cabinet ministers believe that the alternative plan presented in the cabinet would not achieve the defeat of Hamas, nor the return of the hostages, without making clear what that alternative plan was. While Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had told Fox News ahead of the meeting he intended to take full military control of Gaza, the announced plan is narrower, focusing, initially at least, on Gaza City. Is there support for the plan? In pushing ahead with this plan, Netanyahu is going against the wishes of much of the Israeli public, and even key voices in the military. Protests erupted in Israel ahead of the Security Cabinet vote. Families of the hostages warned the government against expanding the military campaign, saying Netanyahu is preparing, quote, the greatest deception of all, by claiming that hostages can be freed through military means. Netanyahu responded to the backlash by insisting that Israel does not intend to fully occupy Gaza, and that the expanded military campaign is to free Gaza from Hamas. Gaza will be demilitarized, and a peaceful civilian administration will be established, one that is not the Palestinian Authority, not Hamas, and not any other terrorist organization, Netanyahu said in a post on social media Friday. This will help free our hostages and ensure Gaza does not pose a threat to Israel in the future, he added. 50 hostages remain in Gaza, at least 20 of whom are believed to be alive. A group of mothers of Israeli soldiers also criticized the plan, saying it would be fatal for hostages and Israeli soldiers. Opinion polls in Israel have consistently shown a large majority in favor of ending the conflict to secure the release of the captives. Israel's military has recommended pursuing diplomacy to end the war, fearing that an expanded operation could ensnare troops. Israel Defense Forces, IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, warned of the danger of worsening the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and the international implications of the escalation, according to an Israeli source who spoke to CNN, who added that his warnings were brushed aside. Netanyahu does have support from far-right members of his cabinet, who are propping up his coalition and have been pushing for a total takeover of Gaza. There has already been strong international criticism of the plan. UK PM Keir Starmer said expanding the fighting would only bring more bloodshed. Leaders from countries like France, Ireland and Canada cautioned against the move, arguing that it would worsen the humanitarian situation in Gaza, while also jeopardizing the lives of the remaining hostages. Several Middle Eastern countries also condemned the Israeli government's decision. Saudi Arabia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said that it disapproved of Israel's adamancy to commit the crimes of starvation of civilians, beastly conduct and ethnic cleansing against our Palestinian brethren. The ministry said the decision demonstrates how the Israeli government does not understand the existential, historic and legal relationship that our Palestinian brethren have to that land. But key Israeli ally the US has effectively already given its approval. Ahead of the Israeli decision to expand the war, Trump voiced no concern, saying it's up to Israel whether to occupy the entire Gaza Strip, adding that he wanted more aid to enter the enclave. What will this mean for Palestinians in Gaza? The first stage of Israel's plan, capturing Gaza City, entails the forced evacuation of up to 1 million Palestinians to southern Gaza, nearly half of the territory's population. The fighting has already devastated Gaza, killing tens of thousands of people, and displacing almost the entire population. A hunger crisis has taken over the Gaza Strip over the past few weeks, as Israel has severely restricted the entry of aid and banned international aid groups from operating there, with authorities reporting daily deaths due to starvation. The plan approved by the Security Cabinet foresees more aid distribution sites in the enclave. Israel and the US would increase the number of aid distribution sites operated by the controversial US and Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, GHF, from the current 4 to up to 16, according to an Israeli official with knowledge of the proposal. But none of these new sites would be set up in Gaza City, in a move apparently designed to force the hundreds of thousands of people living there to leave, by depriving them of access to food. UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk warned on Friday that a takeover of Gaza City will result in more massive forced displacement, more killing, more unbearable suffering, senseless destruction and atrocity crimes. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres similarly said he was gravely alarmed by the Israeli government's decision, which he warned would mark a dangerous escalation in the conflict. Hamas condemned Israel's plan to take over Gaza City as a full-fledged war crime that will come at a high cost. Where does this plan leave Gaza in the long term? The statements by Netanyahu's office avoided references to an occupation of Gaza, which under international law would obligate Israel to provide basic services to ensure the welfare of the population. But the plan does envision Israel eventually taking full security control over Gaza. The military says it already controls 75% of the territory. so seizing Gaza City would move Israel closer to full occupation. Israel withdrew settlers and thousands of troops from Gaza in 2005, and Hamas took power soon after. Beyond ruling out any role for Hamas, Netanyahu has given little clue on his long-term plans for the Gaza, so it is unclear whether the expansion means Israel will have a lasting presence in the territory. Israel can militarily take over Gaza, but it will cost the country in the long term, an analyst said, warning of the complications of a lengthy occupation. But Ofer Guterman, a senior researcher at Israel's Institute for National Security Studies, stressed that purely from a military perspective occupation of the entire enclave was possible. We have done it before, we were in Gaza for decades. Australia to recognize Palestinian state, leaving US increasingly isolated among key allies. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said Monday that his country will recognize a Palestinian state in September, joining a growing list of Western allies as international condemnation and anger builds over Israel's actions in Gaza. A formal recognition will be made at the United Nations General Assembly next month, where, quote, Australia will recognize the right of the Palestinian people to a state of their own, predicated on the commitments Australia has received from the Palestinian Authority, Albanese said at a press conference. On Monday, New Zealand's Foreign Minister Winston Peters said his country was also considering recognizing a Palestinian state, and would make a decision at a cabinet meeting in September. New Zealand has been clear for some time that our recognition of a Palestinian state is a matter of when, not if. Peters said in a statement, echoing the language used by Australian officials in the weeks leading up to Monday's announcement, describing the situation in Gaza as an absolute human catastrophe. New Zealand Prime Minister Christopher Luxon said in a press conference that it was entirely appropriate that we take the time to actually make sure we weigh up our decision and work that through in a sensible way. Australia joins the United Kingdom, France and Canada in announcing plans to recognize a Palestinian state in September. The move leaves the United States increasingly isolated from some of its closest allies in its defense of Israel's escalating military campaign that's decimated the besieged enclave after almost 2 years of war. If Wellington also moves, it will mean that 4 of the Five Eyes intelligence sharing network comprising the US, UK, Canada, Australia and New Zealand will recognize Palestinian statehood. Former New Zealand Prime Minister Helen Clark later criticized Luxon for not moving to quickly join Australia and other Western allies. We now really seem to stand for nothing except, somehow wanting to save our own skin in a tariff war, she told RNZ on Tuesday. I think it's really quite a humiliating position for New Zealand to be in. Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong said she'd spoken to US Foreign Secretary Marco Rubio in a call Sunday to give him advance notice of Australia's impending announcement. A readout of the call released by the US did not mention Palestinian statehood. In an interview with Catholic broadcaster EWTN last week, Rubio said that declarations of support for a Palestinian state were largely symbolic and only emboldened Hamas and made it harder to achieve peace. Albanese said Australia had sought and received assurances from Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas that Hamas would play no role in any future Palestinian state. Other conditions include a commitment to demilitarize and to hold general elections, abolish a system of payments to the families of prisoners and martyrs, and governance and education reform, as well as international oversight to guard against the incitement of violence and hatred, Albanese said. A two-state solution is humanity's best hope to break the cycle of violence in the Middle East, and to bring an end to the conflict, suffering and starvation in Gaza, he said. This is about much more than drawing a line on a map. This is about delivering a lifeline to the people of Gaza. In a subsequent interview with Australia's public broadcaster ABC, Albanese said he had spoken to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, but found him to be in denial about the human cost of the war in Gaza. He, Netanyahu, again reiterated to me what he has said publicly as well, which is to be in denial about the consequences that are occurring for innocent people, Albanese said. This is starvation, pure and simple. Canada and France have both said they would recognize a Palestinian state in September, when world leaders meet in New York for the UN General Assembly. The UK has said that it will too, if Israel does not meet conditions that include agreeing to a ceasefire in Gaza. On Sunday, Netanyahu gave a rare press conference with international media in which he called steps by Western nations to recognize Palestinian statehood "shameful." To have European countries and Australia march into that rabbit hole, just like that, fall right into it, and buy this canard, is disappointing, Netanyahu said. But it's not going to change our position. "We will not commit national suicide to get a good op-ed for 2 minutes." Australian Foreign Minister Wong said, "We cannot keep doing the same thing and hoping for a different outcome. We can't keep waiting for the end of a peace process that has ground to a halt." Wong framed the decision as an opportunity as a nation to contribute to momentum towards 2 states, which she underscored was the only prospect for peace. Israel announced an expansion of its war in Gaza on Friday, with a planned military takeover of Gaza City that is expected to involve the forced evacuation of up to 1 million people. On Sunday, United Nations officials and UN Security Council member states condemned the plan, saying it would lead to another calamity and constitute further violations of international law. Ramesh Rajasingham, the head of the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OK, in Geneva, said what is unfolding in Gaza is no longer a looming hunger crisis. This is starvation, pure and simple. Last month, the UN-backed Food Security Agency, the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification (IPC), warned that the worst-case scenario of famine was unfolding in Gaza, its starkest alert yet as starvation spreads. Hunger-related deaths are rising in the enclave, especially among children, Rajasingham told the UN Security Council. Since October 2023, 98 children have died from severe acute malnutrition, 37 since July 1 alone, he said, citing health authorities in Gaza. Israel is facing growing global condemnation over its conduct in Gaza, with large protests breaking out in major cities, including London and Australia's Sydney, as people demonstrate their horror and anger over starvation in the territory. More than 460 people were arrested at a massive protest in London on Saturday, and, last week, more than 90,000 people marched across the Sydney Harbour Bridge to protest the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Organisers put the figure at closer to 300,000 and plan more protests this month.